record. Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video live on YouTube. Out to you because you're watching, thank you. Meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving as a Pilates instructor. Sometimes I have to start recording so that I can just say what I have to say without worrying about what I'm going to say when the recording is happening, or the broadcast, right? Both in this case. So my number one title that you haven't seen yet, because this is YouTube, not Facebook, is Billy Joel and My Pictures in Your Manuals. Okay, that's number one. Billy Joel and My Pictures in Your Manuals. So it was a week ago, I think, in the Parade magazine that comes in the newspaper, there's Billy Joel, and the very last question he answers is, "What are you proudest of?" And he responds, "My ability to move on with life. I've had difficulties, but it never stopped me. Divorces didn't stop me marrying again. Troubles with business didn't stop me from doing business. I have no bitterness about anything, even people who rip me off. I'm content with that. I'm happy. I'm having a happy ending. I'm having a happy ending." That combined with Dennis Quaid today saying that he finally realized that happiness is a decision. But this part about I have no bitterness about anything, even people who rip me off, that brings me to the subject of My Pictures in Your Manuals. A long, long time ago, I had a student who took my pictures directly off of the website and made them look more abstract, so they were harder to identify, and that became their manual. And I have no bitterness about that. Except I got a request recently to use my pictures in their manual, and it made me feel sad that the person back then has the history that they have, rather than being able to say, you know, I actually knew what I was getting, and I bought them, and I had the right to use them, and because why? Mostly because of the history that you paint with your decisions. And so, number two. So the subject is manuals, the makeup of a manual. Okay, and based on my experience in the last incident I told you about, and as many others as you can look at during the burgeoning expansion of people teaching Pilates and creating manuals with which to do it. And so to survive as a Pilates instructor, if you're running a training program, or if you think of that, really it's the stacks of manuals that you have that are all individual subjects, you know, on the shelf behind the school. It's what's in these manuals that you're buying access to, and that you'll know everything that's in all these manuals once you just pay the fee to get access to them. Because the manuals are concrete and they're real and they're physical and you can have them in your hand. And maybe online is just as good, but it still doesn't feel like it. But speaking strictly of manuals that occur in paper and ink that are the basis of a training program or your workshop or whatever, right? If it has any pictures at all, the pictures dominate whatever else is there, in my opinion, right? Because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Number 3, protecting your student. So if someone wants to, if you want to license my images or some of my images in some way to put in some manual of yours, right, I'm all up for that as long as we're really clear about what the understanding is. Okay? And part of the understanding that if you're a regular viewer of my broadcast and you're familiar with MMP as a brand and CT as biodynamics and all that jazz, it would be one thing to license my images to use in your manual, knowing where those images came from and what they represent, or what is represented by where they came from. And all that's simple. It boils down to MMP is an ideal view of Pilates, right? And so my whole career as a photographer documenting Pilates has been to document everything I can that's original Joe, you know, all the archival stuff, because there really isn't that much, but enough to get to the ideal. And so whatever expansion there is, or customization, or fleshing out empty spaces, or whatever added that isn't totally classical, my hope would be that it's perceived with the intent that it was added, and that would be the ideal through which you can look at the original work and either accept or reject non-classical work based on how much it makes sense within the ideal that the classical conveys. And you've heard me reference this before, and a manual is a very important thing, right? And you want it the best that it can be so that it has the biggest impact that it can have as a tool when people make reference to it. Right? So it's serious business. And so recognizing that you're using pictures from a brand of Pilates that has a very particular point of view, either undermines the view you want the manuals to portray, or reinforces the view you want the manuals to portray. So what am I trying to say? All right, so it was a book into a movie where a social climber bought these boots right off of the person that was teaching him how to jump in a very formal setting of horses and jumpers and fox hunts or all that stuff, right? But the guy presumed the use of the boots without allowing any explanation about what it meant if he wore the boots. Because the guy was a total novice and he didn't have the status that the boots implied. And I'm not sure if he wasn't listening or he didn't care or by the time that it might have made a difference, the person he took the boots off of just didn't care. If you're my student, because really in a way if you're using my imagery to do whatever training you're doing, to me you're a student of mine because my imagery is part of what you're using to create the manual. And so this is where, see, just there's so much political perspective on this. I don't know that I can make a decent attempt to... There's pros and there's cons. If you insist on remaining only an aristocratic snob, and just in a healthy way, but being superioristic in a snobby way, by virtue of the aristocracy of Pilates and who knew him and who studied with whom and whose branch you live by, see? That whole lineage thing by tradition is one field to participate in. If you use my pictures, how do you hide that? Even though somebody already did to get a sort of to make it, I think, to deaden the impact of ripping off my work. And that's part of the reality, that's part of human nature, and I'm at peace with that. But I would highly recommend, instead of you ripping off my work, that you have a real license to use it because of its ideal nature. See, that's okay. You want to rip my pictures, and you're a manual, and you're a teacher from this lineage, right? And you have an attitude about your lineage and what you had to teach, and all that's hunky-dory. But it's a huge task to even take the pictures that represent the exercises, let alone have them look any good, let alone have them organized and structured. See? As I've said all along, nothing much is going to change. Currently, the presumption is that Pilates is subjectively interpreted and has no essence of its own. MMP changes that because it introduces a view of Pilates based on an ideal that has no basis of legitimacy in anything other than the theory that the ideal exists. A glimpse of the future, number 4, is that, see, the pictures speak for themselves, and to just let a person buy the pictures and still presume errors about what makes Pilates Pilates, would be to set them up for an embarrassment because they're using pictures that refer to an ideal view. And if they don't, see, I'm trying to work this out as I tell you about it. I don't want you to license my photos and have them undermine your presumption of that the ideal does not exist, and wanting to not legitimize the ideal because it undermines the sense of, see, there's no way you can do this without wrapping your arm around Cornu, meaning, what I really mean by that is the ideal. Just acknowledge that there's an ideal within the work, and that you're the closest one to it based on this lineage of people that knew Joe, and you're as good as you're going to get in terms of acknowledging the reality of the ideal, and then trying to drag that or take that wherever you want to go. And that will either end up as a sail or a sea anchor, depending on how you deploy it, meaning set it up. That was my glimpse of the future, is that